Among home gardeners, one of the most popular garden crops, right up there with tomatoes and peppers, are the cucumbers. And that's a topic I really want to dive into in this video, because I don't want to just talk about growing cucumbers. I want to highlight my top cucumber variety. First off, the flavor, you can't beat it. Secondly, it seems to be, per my experience, a very resilient crop. And this cucumber just looks cool in all of its variety. My absolute favorite cucumber variety to grow is the Hmong cucumber. So this is a cucumber that has originated out of Southeast Asia, and it has some very interesting, unique, enticing qualities about it, and that's what I really want to focus on in this video. Alright, so I'm going to break this down into the pros, right, the positives of this variety, the cons, right? But the cons are more like if you're going to consider growing them for like a market garden or a farm type thing, you know, if you're going to produce saleable produce. And then I'm going to talk about the companions, right? The companion crops that I have grown this plant successfully with. And then I'll close off with just some general points that are always very good to keep in mind when growing cucumbers in general. So first off, let's discuss the positives. Foremost, in my opinion, is the flavor, right? The cucumbers that we usually have access to, a lot of the ones that we will buy at a grocery store or at a farm, those more often than not are cucumber varieties that are grown for, you know, size, weight, storability, aesthetic appeal, uniformity, probably a, you know, mild and predictable flavor. But the Hmong cucumber is not quite as heavily domesticated as a lot of other cucumber varieties out there, right? And so with that, you get a much more complex flavor, right? It's actually even kind of sweet, a little bit of sourness, slightly astringent. In terms of texture, it's a little bit more meaty. It's not quite as like watery as some of these other cucumber varieties are. When we take into account some of the other flavors, right, like the sweet, the sour, the astringent, or the more complex, the more substantial flavors, those are going to be indicative of a higher nutrient content, right? Because all of those secondary metabolites that those plants produce, all of the antioxidants, the polyphenols, the terpenes, all those health promoting compounds add their own unique flavor to it, right? Usually like bitter or astringent, maybe sour, right? And so the more of that you taste, the more of those compounds that food is going to likely have, right? And so this plant is not as heavily domesticated as some other varieties, and so it may actually be higher in some of these beneficial compounds. That bitterness, the astringency, the sourness can also be a natural deterrent to maybe even some other animals, but especially maybe some other insects, some pest insects that may otherwise really seek out this crop to do some damage. And that kind of rolls right into my own observation of kind of seeing that this variety seems to be a little bit resilient, right? I'm not going to use the word resistant, but I'm using the word resilient to cucumber beetles. I will occasionally find some cucumber beetles on this variety of plant. Now, I'm not sure if this year or in other years, if I've just had a more successful trap crop like certain squashes, cucumber beetles will really seek out the squash plants, especially the squash blossoms, right? Because they're big, they're a sense of shelter, they close up at night, not like the smaller cucumber flowers, which are not quite as protective and sheltering to the cucumber beetle. So it could be that it's a trap crop, but it could also be the higher amount of these health promoting compounds that may be more repellent to these cucumber beetles. Right, also this plant is kind of tough, but like in a good way. It can be somewhat drought tolerant. Also, the skin of the cucumbers, this particular variety, can be pretty tough. And that may also inhibit or help to minimize some pest damage, right? Sometimes cucumber beetles will go after the cucumber fruits themselves, but I generally don't really see them going after the fruits on the Hmong cucumber. And part of this, I wonder if it might be because of the tougher, thicker skin on this cucumber. And this cucumber variety grows really well in this climate, this zone 6 to 7 climate. It's a pretty good length of season. If you want to get an earlier start on cucumber production, you might want to consider starting them indoors, right, and then planting them out. But when I direct seed them, I can start getting cucumbers mid to late July, right, and those will pretty much go until frost. Also, the Hmong cucumber, as I said, it's not as domesticated as some other varieties, and part of this is because it's an heirloom. So this variety has been around for a long time. It goes back before modern society, before we got all excited about trying to grow food for a longer shelf life, less flavor, more water content and weight. Back in the days when we accepted, or actually when we celebrated the flavor, the vitality of these crops and these foods that we had access to. So what are the cons? And these cons are not really applicable to me. They're really only what you might want to consider if you're thinking of producing cucumbers for market, if you want to sell them. Because this cucumber is a bit of a nonconformist. It presents a lot of qualities that people might not expect when they are purchasing cucumbers. So first off, the variety, the Hmong cucumber, is probably pretty unfamiliar to most people out there, and that can also be relevant to the flavor profile it has, the appearance it may have in some cases, things of that nature. So in that case, people might be a little less inclined, a little less likely to buy it. But that is also something that might be specific. It might depend on the demographics of your customer base or how even you present this. Again, also, this cucumber is a little bit tougher. It's got a little bit more of a thicker skin, more of a substantial texture to it than what maybe a lot of people might be expecting when they buy a cucumber. And also, because this plant is an heirloom, it has a little bit more genetic variability, more genetic diversity. And when you have more of that, you're going to get a little bit more of an unpredictable product. Different sizes, different shapes, different weights, nuances in the flavor profiles. The coloration of the cucumber fruits can vary too. They can vary from like a whitish green to more of a green to more of a whitish yellow. So there can be a lot of variation. And also sometimes this cucumber can be a bit seedy, right? It can have some pretty big seeds in there. Now it depends on like what stage or what age you harvest that cucumber, but there also might be some variability between when those seeds mature and when that cucumber is at its best for picking. So in terms of companions, I've done a bunch of companion planting with this cucumber variety over the years. One companion planting strategy that has really worked for me is planting it with the sorghum, the green beans, and the cosmos. The sorghum can be somewhat allelopathic, so it may repress the growth of other plants, but the cucumber, at least this variety, doesn't seem to be negatively affected at all. And I like that the sorghum can grow up, it can produce those long straight stalks, and the cucumber can just spread out underneath as a ground cover, right, to catch all that excess light. And then as I have outlined here, right, so I'll alternate between the sorghum and the cucumber down the middle aisle of a garden bed, and then on either side of that garden bed I will also plant a row of beans, like green beans, for example, right? And that gives the cucumbers room inside that bed between the green bean plants and between the sorghum to really spread out and to grow. And then I'll also add in some cosmos, right? So like some cosmos sulphureus for a variety of reasons. For one thing, it really makes the garden bed look beautiful, but it also has some other important aspects, right? So this whole garden bed can actually kind of be seen as kind of a cover crop. Yeah, you're producing food from it and you're harvesting it, but in terms of the soil and the ecological health that you're also promoting along with it, it's extremely beneficial. So a lot of these green beans, a lot of these bean plants can produce their own nitrogen to a large degree, right? So they're not pulling so much of that out of the soil. The sorghum is a C4 photosynthetic plant. So it's really efficient at using the sun's energy to manufacture all these organic compounds, all these root exudates, sugars, and structural materials as well, right? Especially when we talk about underground biomass. The sorghum roots can go multiple feet down into the soil, help to break up soil compaction and add organic matter even down into the deeper depths of the soil profile. And it can also help to facilitate the infiltration of water into deeper down into the soil as well. And then we have the cosmos, which is a flower in the aster family. And so of course this flower can attract a lot of beneficial insects, right? So and pollinators. You can pull in more pollinators, and maybe you can also help to facilitate the pollination of those cucumber flowers as well. Now the cosmos also has somewhat of a unique quality to it, right? Being in the aster family, this is a flower that is very attractive to soldier beetles. And so soldier beetles may actually go after cucumber beetle larvae. And this can be extremely beneficial for any cucumber variety that you grow, because of course the cucumber beetles can transmit a deadly disease, at least deadly for cucumber plants, where this specific type of bacteria will get into the plant. It will populate the area, clog up the vasculature, and will create an embolism and will kill the plant within a very short amount of time. So being able to cut down on the cucumber beetle populations can also be beneficial. But in small amounts, the cucumber beetles themselves can also actually benefit the plant to some degree, the cucumber plant, as pollinators themselves. So the cucumber will also spread out in this area, and it will create a nice ground cover, right? Helping to regulate soil temperature, moisture, and help to create a beneficial habitat for some of these beneficial insects that might need a little bit more shade during the daylight hours on hot summer days. Another companion planting strategy that I'm especially working with this year is the Hmong cucumber planted with the Koff and pepper. So of course what I did was I alternated the pepper and the cucumber on the two outer rows in this garden bed, and then I had Koff down the center. And so the Koff is a really tall plant in the mallow family. It's been used as a food but also a fiber crop. These Koff seeds I actually got from the Experimental Farm Network. And so this Koff, it doesn't branch out a whole lot, at least up here in the north, but it will grow super tall, right? So I just try to make sure I give that plenty of space, and then the peppers will grow on either side of the Koff, and I alternate those with the cucumber, and the cucumber will kind of spread out and fill in the gaps. Now a bit of a challenge with this is, even though I transplanted the peppers in, so they had like a multiple month head start on the cucumbers, the cucumbers still kind of grow faster, right? So you'll have to kind of be on top of your game in terms of like directing or guiding the cucumber vines as they vine out, so they're not going over top of the pepper plants, because the peppers need a good bit of light as well. One thing I might consider for the next year is to space the peppers out a little bit more, so you have a little bit more space to work with. I probably planted them a little bit closer than I needed to, so that would be one option. And then of course what I would do also is I would kind of help to kind of guide the vines as they grow out, right? So they're not growing on top of the pepper plants. And that was just one thing that I fell behind on, because I'm just not able to be here all the time. And then just some general aspects that we really want to pay attention to when growing any cucumber variety, right? And this can, a lot of this can apply to the Hmong cucumber variety as well, is if we want to grow successful cucumbers, we want to be aware of these certain points, right? Like the cucumber beetles, right, is one huge thing. So we want to make sure that we are developing a plan to really help to control these cucumber beetles. Cucumber beetles, if in large enough numbers, can just absolutely destroy a lot of cucurbitaceous crops, right? Plants in the melon and the gourd family. So another thing we want to consider is mulch, because cucumbers do really well with consistent moisture in the soil. So if we can help to hold that moisture in, that can be really beneficial to the root zone of these cucumber plants. Also, especially if we're doing like a grass mulch, that can also help to add in some nitrogen, which can be really beneficial to cucumber growth. Also, the mulch can also help to increase the habitat for different kinds of insect or arachnid predators that may also go after the cucumber beetles, right? The soldier beetles, right? They need a damp and moist soil environment, right? And so that habitat can be really beneficial for the soldier beetles. Of course, water and sunlight. Cucumber plants like pretty much full sun, and they like a consistent water supply as well. So those are two very key, very important points when growing cucumbers. So thank you so much for checking out this video on cucumbers, specifically the Hmong cucumber. This is absolutely one of the crops that I look forward to growing each and every year. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.